Hello and welcome to the interview here on France 24. Our guest today is Caroline Fourès, who's a well-known writer and activist here in France. She just wrote a book called INA. INA stands for Inna Shevchenko, the Ukrainian leader of Femen, the movement known around the world for their spectacular bare-breasted demonstrations against religion and against a few heads of state. This week, a court in Paris will begin hearings on their demonstration inside the Cathedral of Notre Dame last year to denounce the Vatican's stance on gay rights. This book was initially supposed to be an essay on this new form of feminist activism, just like the ones Caroline Fourès has penned over the years, be it about radical Islam or the far right. However, this turned into a novel because, Caroline Fourès, you had a crush on your subject matter, Inna Shevchenko. So it's a very interesting book because it's both an essay and something very personal. How did you deal with this dual aspect?
This is what I'm telling in the book. It's not only about having feelings for the subject of the book. It's also about dealing with this very mysterious character that can be Inna Shevchenko, a very closed character. And when you are...
Despite all the appearances.
Of course, yes, this is what it is interesting. This is this contradiction between a way to protest, which is really exhibitionist, and a person who is very, very close as Inna. And when you are one of the journalists who succeed to be very close to her for, of course, feeling reason, for love reason, then you have to explain why it's so difficult to deal with this two sides of her, this warrior side and this very intimate and sometimes even conservative side of Inna.
Right. I mean, towards the end of the book, I understand there has been kind of dispute or breakup.
But political fight, because
I
just want to clarify something. This book is very, very political.
Right.
It's about two ways to see feminism, two ways to see how to fight, and also, yes, two ways about how to love. But everything, as very often in feminism, everything is political inside.
Right, because most of the arguments are about politics. But what's interesting is your description of Inna Shevchenko, and basically you're saying she's everything but the typical Ukrainian blonde that people might have in mind.
For sure, she can be proud of it. No, she's born, and it's very important to describe what Ukraine she faced when she was young, and obviously with today in demonstrating, and probably Inna would be for sure she would be in Maidan today if she didn't cut this cross to support Pussy Riot, who forced her to be in exile in France. This is where we met. But we met with two different political culture. I'm coming from the French Revolution, but who is today, of course, the capital of more art of living, coming from the Enlightenment philosophy. She's coming from this philosophy more Marxist, more revolutionary, and she thinks she's in war every day, without no peace, never. And of course, the situation in Ukraine that we see today, Yanukovych, who want to arrest her because of what she did to support Pussy Riot, the president of Ukraine, everything is part of activism. She lost her job in Kiev because of her activism in Femen.
But she was a brilliant student who had maybe a totally different and probably successful life in front of her. And then suddenly in her early 20s, she decides to throw this out of the window. Why?
This is one of the mystery I wanted to explain. Why a so smart girl who could have been a very famous journalist in Ukraine became this so wild feminist, wild warrior. We want to be an activist without past, without future, without no feelings for example, a family or
That's
just
what she
have
says
a break.
in the book. You know.
Of course, this is what she said. Of course, she's more complex than that. Of course, she has a part also fragility. It's also what I try to describe. But she's in war for sure because she thinks that as other founder of Femen, as Sasha, Oksana, Inna, other girls who did found Femen, they think that in Ukraine, after the collapse of the wall, after the end of communism, women had this feeling of having one choice, becoming to marry someone, to go to university to find a husband, or just to become a prostitute. And whatever we think about the way they choose to protest, Femen, by this naked war, this naked breast way to protest, did bring attention to the situation about women's rights in Ukraine, about the fact that the prostitution there, mafia, corruption is everywhere.
Right, but it morphs into something more global, obviously more international, but also in terms of topics. There is, you talk about it, and we've seen it quite a lot here on France 24, this topless jihad with the support for Amina, this activist who was jailed in Tunisia. And so isn't there maybe a very fuzzy ideology, because you fight for gay rights, you fight against the church, against Islam, and it loses all meaning in the end?
No, actually, I think that people maybe they do believe that feminism is just about women's rights, but it is more large than that. It's a revolution with touching every important subject, like a dictatorship or religion. Femen has only three lines, not so much: religion, sex industry, and dictatorship. This is why, for example, Ina did protest in Belarus, which was very, very brave. I mean, she has been tortured because she did protest against the KGB in Belarus. You can imagine what was the reaction of the regime. And what is strong also is that they connect with other feminists from the Arab world, like Alia El-Mahdi in Egypt, like Amina in Tunisia, who have the same problem, is that the male domination is to prostitute women or to cover their bodies. At the end, it is the same domination about women's bodies. So when they unite their free body, when they unite their naked breast against fanatics or against mafia, it's very, very strong.
Right, but in the book, part of your quarrel with her is that you tell her, you know, here you're in France, a deeply secular country, and so going inside Notre Dame or attacking religion or maybe attacking brutally Islam is not the way to go. And she tells you, well, basically, you're an old school conservative. You don't know what revolution is. You're just thinking how to protect maybe France and French values rather than our cause.
Yes, this is part of the debate between us. And I think it's an interesting debate. It's part of a generation debate. But clearly, you can fight for universal values. And I think really, I'm really universalist. I think deeply that the fight of Amina, the fight of Alia El-Mahdi is the same fight as Ina Shevchenko or me. But after saying that, I think that there is different way to make your point in some countries. For example, when you are in a country where church and politics is mixed, then I think it's making sense that you can go inside a church, like the Pussy Riot in Moscow, like Femen in Kiev, or maybe today like in Spain, where the church is pushing to revoke the right to abort. Then you can go inside the church to make a point. If you do it in a country where secularism protects women's rights from the intrusion of the church, it's less, let's say, effective. It can be even counter-effective. But still, Ina can answer me, church is lobbying against the right to abort everywhere in the world. It's doing that in the United Nations, it's doing that also in France. So we can send just one topless woman in a church. It's not so a big deal.
Right. What about the future of this movement? Isn't it running out of breath? Because how many times can you go bare-breasted in the streets, protest against the Vatican, against Vladimir Putin because you don't like him? Isn't this a little bit a problem after a while? Where do you go from there?
It's true that Femen has an unbelievably great power on their breast. I mean, it's a nuclear power that media give to Femen because their way to protest is very attractive. So it gives a huge responsibility, and certainly they can one day they can go too far, or they have to renew themselves. They have to renew their way to protest. They have to renew their message to go deeper. But unfortunately, there is so many actualities who can put anger inside the heart of women those days, and not only those days, of course, since a long time. That if they are smart, if they probably use a certain sense of humor, they will continue.
Right. There is criticism from several of ex-Femen who say it is a military organization, that it is basically fighting a dictatorship, but inside there is a dictator, and Colonel Shevchenko, as you call her sometimes, is the one who decides for everyone, and those who disagree are basically out of line.
Yeah, sometimes even to make a joke, I can compare her to Kim Jong-un in North Korea. She has a little bit this style, yes. Frankly, she don't try to hide it. She's quite proud of it. And of course, there is two sides of it. There is partly it's true. She's a girl of a colonel, and she duplicates a little bit this style. And of course, there is a part which is not exactly true, because it's still a feminist group. I mean, it's still a group we pretending to be very extremist, telling you all the time, we're going to be radical, we're going to be violent, but at the end of the day, they didn't beat anyone. They are just been beaten. They have been beaten after the action in Notre Dame. They have been beaten in the street in Paris by neo-fascists. They have been beaten in Belarus. They have been beaten by cops of Putin. They never beat someone. So we have to balance between their approach, which is to say they are extremists, and the reality. But I do not know. I do not know if one day they are very lost. They are facing a lot of death threats. They are very, very attacked. I don't know if one day Ina won't go too far. I cannot say.
Right. That was precisely my last question. At the end of the book, she says, you know, I'm going to die, but at least you'll remember me through this book. Do you think she has maybe a suicidal part in her, or is it just...
It's a romantic way to be for her. I mean, it's very, or Russian or Ukrainian, or I don't know. It's coming also for this poetry, this literature. We think that the great hero has to die young. She thinks, but when you are 20s, you think you're going to die young. Many of us have been there. So she can evolve. She's living in Paris now. She can finally start to love life. Maybe sometimes she do. And sometimes, yes, she has this dark character that... make me very, very worried. So it's also part of this book to be worried.
Did she like the book?
Not everything. I cannot say that. No, I don't think she liked the book.
Okay, thank you very much, Caroline Fourest. If you want to read more about Ina Shevchenko, you can read this book in French and maybe one day in English. Thank you for watching this edition of The Interview here on France 24.